All human beings lie. All politicians lie to a certain extent. They shade the truth and so forth. But not all lies are equal.
One dimension of deception is the magnitude. How big is it? When is it okay to lie to the public? Presidents especially need to weigh the costs and benefits of the deception.
The United States has not swapped boatloads of plane loads of American weapons for the return of American hostages, and we will not.
In looking at presidential candidates and trying to judge them, it's important to look at U.S. history and how other presidents have behaved, and you can make judgments about whether other presidents made serious mistakes.
I did not have sexual relations with that woman, Miss Lewinsky.
Secret reconnaissance of Russia by high-flying American U-2 jets ended when one was downed deep in Soviet territory.
But nevertheless, there's a difference between minor lies, shading the truth, or misleading the country in something important about public policy.
We found the weapons of mass destruction. We found biological laboratories.
Well, I think when you compare Donald Trump's deception with Hillary Clinton's deceptions, they're very different. Hillary seemed to be born out of the classic, what I would characterize as classic human lying, that is, protective deception. There's problematic information sitting in her head about emails or whatever, so she feels the best way to deal with it is to leave stuff out. Classic, just holding back. And then when pressed, kind of says some false things and kind of is ambiguous and stuff.
I have provided the department with all of the work-related emails that I had, and that's really what is at the core of any kind of effort to make sure that material is collected.
It's all the classic things that you and I and other people do in terms of why we deceive.
When you say the emails are located, let's make sure we're talking about the same thing. An American emailing another American about Dick Cheney. And does the NSA have capacity to find out who those parties are by monitoring, by the content of their email?
No.
Does the NSA collect any type of data at all on millions or hundreds of millions of Americans?
No, sir.
It does not.
Not wittingly. There are cases where they could inadvertently, perhaps, collect, but not wittingly.
All right.
In 2000, it came to light that soldiers from the 4th Psychological Operations Group have been interning at the American News Network's Cable News Network, CNN, and National Public Radio, NPR, during the late 1990s. The program was an attempt to provide its PSYOP personnel with the expertise developed by the private sector under its Training with Industry program. The program caused concern about the influence these soldiers might have on American news and programs, and that they were terminated. This excerpt is from the National Public Radio, reported on April 10th, 2000.
Interns from the U.S. Army's 4th Psychological Operations Group, Psyops, were working in the news divisions at both CNN and National Public Radio last year. Both organizations say the interns were placed without the knowledge of senior news management, and they will no longer accept any Psyops interns. NPR's Brooke Gladstone has a report.
Last year, CNN played host to 5 interns from the Psyops group. NPR says its 3 Psyop interns were employed as temporary administrative news interns, answering phones, filing scripts, copying and preparing program schedules. They each worked for a couple of months beginning in September 1998 and ending in May of last year. In a statement today, NPR President Kevin Close says that upon learning of the pre-existing relationship of the 3 interns to the U.S. Army, NPR News Management terminated acceptance of such interns in the future. Lieutenant Colonel Paul Mullen, deputy commander of the Psyops group, says the internships offered his soldiers the chance to gain some first-hand experience in the news business.
We asked to go with NPR and CNN because we wanted to get our broadcasters, our communication center operators, and our PSYOP soldiers an opportunity to work with the best and see how they do their news gathering and transmission of information so we can do better.
What Psyops does, according to Lieutenant Colonel Mullen, is to express the voice of America's military command abroad. He says it's used to inform American friends and mislead its enemies, as when in the Gulf War it sought to give Saddam Hussein an inaccurate sense of American troop movements. But Psyops is legally prohibited from manipulating the U.S. media.
I think the fact that both news outlets would accept interns from the military shows that the relationship between the news outlets and the military is too close.
Jim Narikis edits Extra, the newsletter of the liberal media watchdog group FAIR.
Particularly with CNN, who have had interns from the military, not from Psyops, but from other parts of the military for a long time now. A lot of their coverage has to do with getting into trouble spots, and it is a boon to them to have a friendly relationship with the military.
Does CNN go to hotspots? Absolutely.
Susan Binford is CNN's Vice President for Public Relations.
But we are renowned for our independence, impartiality, and commitment to upholding the highest journalistic standards. We found it very inappropriate for Psyops personnel to be at CNN. They're not here now, and they never again will be at CNN.
I understand. I'm disappointed.
Lieutenant Colonel Paul Mullen.
They want to preclude the view that psychological operations could influence the U.S. press, which we certainly don't. But we influence it as much as any interns would.
CNN dismissed its Psyops interns shortly after reports of their presence surfaced in a Dutch newspaper in February. If CNN's senior news managers were not aware of the situation, the interns' immediate supervisors were, according to an article by Max Robbins in this week's TV Guide. Robbins, whose column revealed that Psyops interns also had worked at NPR, wonders how the average news operation could overlook them.
We have a pretty active newsroom here. I don't know who everybody is, but you see some young person around. You say, hey, who's that? That's Joe. He's from Psyops. I think it would raise an eyebrow.
One NPR spokesman told Robbins that the interns did a fine job at NPR, but under no circumstances would they be back. Brooke Gladstone, NPR News.
The 4th Psychological Operations Group, Airborne, is one of the United States Army's active military information support operation units, along with the 8th Psychological Operations Group, which was activated on August 26, 2011 at Fort Bragg. The 8th Group has responsibility for the 1st, 5th, and 9th Psychological Operations Battalions. The 4th Group has responsibility for the 3rd, 6th, 7th, and 8th Battalions, with a total of about 800 soldiers. On June 21st, 2010, an announcement was made that the military intended to rename Psychological Operations, or PSYOP, to Military Information Support Operations. The decision made a few days earlier by Admiral Eric Olson, commander of the United States Special Operations Command and Army's Chief of Staff General George Casey, was propagated through a memo dated June 23, 2010. By October 2017, the U.S. Army Special Operations Command reverted its decision, changing their name back to PSYOP, stating Psychological Operations refers to the name of units, while MISO refers to the function that soldiers in PSYOP units perform. The unit is based at Fort Bragg, North Carolina, and is a part of the 1st Special Forces Command under the United States Army Special Operations Command. The 4th POG was constituted on November 7, 1967 in the regular Army as Headquarters and Headquarters Company, 4th Psychological Operations Group, originally activated on December 1st, 1967 in Vietnam. It was inactivated by October 2nd, 1971 at Fort Lewis, Washington, and reactivated on September 13th, 1972 at Fort Bragg. The group subsequently provided psychological operations support to missions ranging from humanitarian assistance, such as Operation Provide Promise in Bosnia-Herzegovina, counter drug in South America and Asia, demining operations around the globe, and peacekeeping in Bosnia and Kosovo. By 2000, the 4th Psychological Operations Group Provisional Task Organization consisted of a group headquarters and headquarters company. 3 regionally oriented battalions, 1 tactical support battalion, and 1 psychological operations dissemination battalion. A provisional battalion normally aligned with the group provided support for the U.S. Pacific Command area of responsibility. After the September 11, 2001 terrorist attacks in the United States, the 4th Psychological Operations Group was heavily engaged in the global war on terror, subsequently referred to as Overseas Contingency Operations in Afghanistan, Iraq, the Horn of Africa, the Philippines, and other areas throughout the globe. By October of 2004, the 5th Psychological Operations Battalion was activated and assigned to the group. It was tasked with a regional focus in the PSYOP area of responsibility. Previously, regional support for PSYOP area of responsibility has been filled by the Provisional PACOM Psychological Operations Battalion, most members of which had come from members of B Company, the 8th Psychological Operations Battalion. This unit was inactivated with the activation of the 5th Psychological Operations Battalion. The mission was to spread intentional disinformation and manipulation of a viewing audience in which it tended to target. For example, arguably the most visible image of the 2003 invasion of Iraq was the toppling of a statue of Saddam Hussein in Friedel Square in central Baghdad. Allegations that the event was staged had been published. It is claimed it was actually an idea hatched by an Army psychological operations team. Allegations surfaced that not only were the cheering group of people surrounding the statue, in fact, smaller than they were made out to be in media depictions, but that also the group were not local to the area and were instead brought in by the military for the specific purpose of watching and lending credence to the pre-planned toppling. In 2003, Sergeant Mark Hadsell claimed to have used loud music during the interrogation of Iraqi prisoners. According to his report, these people hadn't heard heavy metal. They can't take it. If you play it for 24 hours, your brain and body functions start to slide, your train of thought slows down, and your will is broken. That's when we come in and talk to them. Other reports of the use of music during the interrogation have occasionally plagued the PSYOP operations. The Associated Press reported on December 9, 2008, that various musicians were coordinating their objectives to the use of their music as a technique for softening up captives through an initiative called 0dB. However, not all musicians have taken issue with the possibility that their music is being used during interrogations. Steve Benton of the group Drowning Pool commented supportively, "I take it as an honor to think that perhaps our song could be used to quell another 9/11 attack or something like that." In 2008, the New York Times exposed how analysts portrayed in the U.S. media as independent and objective were in fact under the tutelage of the Pentagon. And according to the New York Times in 2008, hidden behind that appearance of objectivity, though, is a Pentagon information apparatus that has used those analysts in a campaign to generate favorable news coverage of the administration's wartime performance. In February of 2011, journalist Michael Hastings reported in Rolling Stone that Lieutenant Colonel Michael Holmes, the supposed leader of the PSYOP group in Afghanistan, alleged that Lieutenant General William B. Caldwell, a 3-star general in charge of training troops in Afghanistan, ordered Holmes and his group to perform in-depth research on visiting U.S. congressmen in order to spin presentations and visits. According to Holmes, his team was tasked with illegally providing themes and messages in influence to people and leadership of the United States. Reported targets included U.S. Senators John McCain, Joe Lieberman, Jack Reed, Al Franken, Carl Levin, Steve Israel of the House Appropriations Committee, Admiral Mike Mullen of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the Czech ambassador to Afghanistan, the German interior minister, and think tank analysts. Under the 1948 Smith-Mundt Act, such operations may not be used to target Americans. When Holmes attempted to seek counsel and to protest, he was placed under investigation by the military at the behest of General Caldwell's chief of staff. Caldwell's spokesman, Lieutenant Colonel Sean Stroud, denied Holmes' assertions, and other unnamed military officials disputed Holmes' claims as false and misleading, saying that there are no records of him ever completing any PSYOP training. Subsequently, Holmes conceded that he was not a psychological operations officer, nor was he in charge of a psychological operations unit, and acknowledged that Caldwell's orders were fairly innocuous. Officials say that Holmes spent his time in theater, starting a strategic communications business with Major Laurel Levine, with whom he concluded an improper relationship in Afghanistan. A former aide once said, "At no point did Holmes ever provide a product to General Caldwell." General David Petraeus has since ordered an investigation into the alleged incident. There are many other types of psychological operations: COINTELPRO, Lockheed EC-130, Operation Mockingbird, the Pentagon Military Analyst Program, propaganda, fake news, disinformation, including the CIA Special Activities Division, which, by the way, is a division of the Central Intelligence Agency responsible for covert and paramilitary operations. The unit was named the Special Activities Division prior to 2016, and they handle many other operations, including intentional misleading, media manipulation, and also raids, ambushes, sabotage, and unconventional warfare, including black propaganda. The propaganda included leaflets, newspapers, magazine, books, radio and television, all of which are geared to convey the U.S. message appropriate to the region and to conduct intentional disinformation on a country or an agency or government in the hopes of committing an illegal coup within the country and implement a Western-backed government. But now the war is here at home. The operations are on our TV. It's time to turn it off.